Amen. Well, Kids Connection 4 and 5, if you guys are ready, Mr. Mike and Miss Jan are here and ready for you guys. You can head out that direction. While they're going, let me share with you a couple of things that are important. Number one, today is what we're calling a next step lunch. So if you're new to HCC or you've been around a while and you're just trying to figure out, hey, what's next? How do I figure out where has HCC been? Where is it going? What does it look like? If you just want free lunch, and you want us to buy you lunch today? What? I'm just kidding. Well, we will buy you lunch, but you have to sit through our next step lunch if that's what you're looking for. But we will have lunch at Longhorn Cafe. We're going to go into one of the rooms right there. Angel will be there as well with some of our ministry team leaders and just kind of share with you ways that you can get plugged in, what that looks like, and opportunities to do that. So that's immediately following celebration today. Secondly, we've got a brand new connection group. There's a list of them outside on the connection table like this. It's got all kinds of them on there, but we got a new one that starts tomorrow. So tomorrow night, if you're a guy and you're looking for a men's connection group, Chris Parker's leading one. All that information is here. All the connection groups, by the way, if you go to heightscc.com, click on the calendar. They're all listed on there. You can go to one that you're looking for, click on it, and when you click on it, it'll then tell you who leads it, what their phone number is, how to get a hold of them, what they're studying, who it's for, all those kind of things. So all that's available to you there. Secondly, there's a fall events page out there. That'll tell you lots of things that are coming. We've already got 2 or 3 things to add to it, but we didn't go through them all last week, so I didn't add it. But they are added again to the calendar. So if you're looking, hey, what's coming down the road, all that stuff is on that calendar. One of those is a trip to Mexico. We heard about that last week. It's going to be October 7th through the 10th. Here's the deal. It's a pretty quick turnaround. If you are interested in going, we'll be doing VBS. We'll be doing light construction, maybe hanging ceiling fans, painting, those sorts of things. So if that's in your wheelhouse and you can leave on a Wednesday and come back on a Saturday to head with us, it's $225 to go. We just need to know if you're going because the meeting is a week from tomorrow. So next Sunday will be the deadline to go, hey, I've looked at my calendar, I can work it out, I've got the time, and I'm ready to go and be God's hands and feet and have a story that I can tell as well. We're partnering with 2 other churches, so it should be a blast. There'll be 3 churches of us going down and having a great time that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, October 7th through 10th. Lastly, these little deals are out on the foyer out there. It's called Sweep Over SA. We're going to join several churches in San Antonio the weekend of September 11th through the 13th, somewhere that weekend to be God's hands and feet. And so some churches are actually taking off on Sunday and going out. Others, we're going to meet on Saturday and then go out and serve the homeless folks together. But if your schedule is already booked on Saturday, then sometime that weekend, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, we are asking that all of our church go out and be God's hands and feet in his distribution center of the gospel. The tool we're going to give you to do that is the week before, Labor Day weekend, 2 weeks from now. After celebration, we'll have tables set up. We're going to have all the supplies on it, toothpaste and socks and underwear and granola bars and gift cards. And you're literally going to go down the line with your family. So you'll go get your kids, bring them back, go down the line and stuff your big Ziploc or Ziplocs, depending on how many you want to distribute, as a family, and then take them with you. That way, if you can't come Saturday, then your family can be on the lookout Friday night. Let's go somewhere and let's go bless someone and let's go. And we're gonna encourage you to pray with them, to introduce yourself, to hear their story, to don't just roll the window down and throw the bag at them along the way, but to literally, let's see what happens in our city on a weekend when hundreds of churches come together and all decide to see how we can serve our city together. So that weekend is September 11th through the 13th. It's called Sweep SA, so you'll be seeing some of that and more in terms of promotion as well. So today, we're kicking off a new series. It's up here that I'm pretty excited about. It's called In the Meantime. And here's the sort of pivotal question. What do we do when there's nothing else we can do? So what do we do when it seems like, hey, we don't have any choice? This is just sort of the new normal for us, right? We find ourselves in a set of circumstances that perhaps there's no way out, right? There's a lot of things in our life that we have control over, and so we can have some input in. And then we also find ourselves in seasons of our lives where, hey, there are some things that have happened around me that at this point in my life, I have absolutely no control over what the future even looks like. For some of us, it's relational. Right? Maybe our marriage, we look back and our marriage isn't all that great, to be honest, but we don't want a divorce and they don't want a divorce, and neither one of us is willing to budge or change or go to counseling or to do any of the heavy lifting that it takes for it to be any different. And so relationally, we found ourselves just kind of stuck in a marriage that goes, hey, you know what? This just is what it is. This is the new normal. For some of us, it's our kids. right? And lots of you guys have young kids, and so you're not quite here yet, but man, we're raising kids, and we were back in the 9th grade telling them, hey, you guys, these grades matter. These grades matter. And now they're into that senior year of high school, and they're trying to apply to colleges. And they can't seem to get in where they want to go to college. And they're like, but I've had a great last 2 semesters. Doesn't that count for anything? And we want to look at them and go, man, it's too late. And so we've prayed and prayed and prayed for them to perhaps follow in our footsteps, or we've had a picture of the hopes and dreams for their life, and now it doesn't seem that it's going to work out that way. So they graduate from high school and go and get a job and start working, and their life takes a completely different turn than what we anticipated as we were raising them up and praying and seeking what God had for them. And maybe it's our kids, maybe it's financially. Right, you found yourself in a situation financially where unless you win the lottery, there's no chance of your financial hopes and dreams coming true. Right, you got to play first, right? So that kind of makes that out for a lot of us anyway. You know, but I don't know what happened. Maybe we lost a job. Maybe you were in a job and you lost it, and now no one else in that field wants to hire you for that, and you found yourself kind of stuck. You found a job that you can make it and barely make ends meet, but the truth of the matter is the financial dreams that you have had for yourself your whole life just don't ever seem to be possible. Maybe it's health related. You went to the doctor and you got diagnosed with something that maybe it's not going to kill us, but we're going to have to live with it the rest of our life. It's chronic. It's debilitating. They can treat it, but they can't cure it. And so we're going to live with it the rest of our lives. I don't know what your moment is, but we're going to call these moments in the meantime. In the meantime moments, what do I do when there's nothing else I can do? I said it a minute ago, maybe it's academic for our students that are starting back to school. And those of you moms and dads that have them, man, start imploring in them, hey, would you please understand this stuff does matter along the way. Because once they get into high school and then they try to get into college, and if they get into college, they're looking back and going, no, I can't get into grad school. I can't get into med school. I can't get into dental school. Sammy asked just this week, Dad, I'm graduating next year, and I'm applying to all these places, and I'm starting the process of getting a job, but everybody keeps asking me what my college GPA is. Why does that matter? Right? Maybe it's academic, or it's that internal emotional battle. Anybody besides me ever get jealous? Look around. Man, the hopes and dreams, the future that I saw for myself just isn't what I seem to be living, and I'm actually looking around and it seems like everybody else is living my life. I've had people say that to me before. Hey, Ken, man, I don't even feel like I'm living my own life. I feel like I'm living somebody else's story. And everywhere I look, it seems like everybody else is living the one that I was supposed to be living. They have this nice, neat package that's all put together, and it was the one that I had hopes and dreams for. And so we find ourselves in these in the meantime moments. What do we do? Right? Anybody want to run? I've been there. But we're not willing to run. We're not willing to just try to get out of it. We don't want to abandon our family, although that's an option. Right? We don't want to give up on our kids. Like some people do. It's like, no, I can't do that. I see what's happening, but I'm not willing to give up on them along the way. Some people drink themselves into a state of oblivion day after day after day, which ultimately only leads to more in the meantime moments along the way. And then being in church isn't always, I have found, even the best, safest answer either. Because Christians, man, we can say some of the darndest things sometimes. Right? You be in one of these in the meantime moments and somebody say, oh, Ken, you are not going to believe it. Man, God just answered my prayer in an unbelievable way this week. And so we sort of lean in. Because we're in an in the meantime moment and we really need God to answer our prayer at the moment. And so we're like, well, tell me a little more. I say, dude, Tuesday night, I had a place that I needed to be and I could not find my keys. And you're like, your keys? Yeah, I couldn't find them. I was getting ready to be late. And man, my sweet husband, God bless him, he came home early that day. And when he flipped the door open, the keys were jingling in the door. And I thought, oh, praise God. Thank you, Jesus. And we're thinking to ourselves, I hate you. I don't even want to be in your connection group. Because you don't even know what a problem is. If you want to know what a problem is, let me tell you about my life, right? What do we do when we find ourselves in the meantime? We have these preferred futures that we've had visions of. All of us thought, hey, my family's supposed to look like this when I grow up. At this age, I'm supposed to be financially stable and my finances are supposed to look like this. We've all had this vision of a preferred future. And when it doesn't happen, we begin to get discouraged a little bit along the way. And then what I've found is we start to not only tell ourselves some lies along the way, but we actually start to believe them. Things like this. And maybe some of you are in this season right now, or you've been in this season, and we start to tell ourselves, you know what, I'm just never, ever, ever, ever going to be happy again. And this in the meantime moment has no future of ever being any different, and I just don't stand a chance of ever being happy again. Some of us, it's so desperate that we actually look back and think, man, I long for the days of middle school and high school again, when mom and dad paid all the bills and I had all the freedom in the world. And what I thought was just a brutal season of my life was one of the greatest times of my life. And I'm never going to be that happy again. Some of us look back to that first year of marriage, that dating time when the romance was just so, so special. Those first couple years of parenting before they were old enough to talk back. Right? And we look back and think, man, I'm just never going to be that happy again. And not only do we start telling ourselves that, if we're not careful, we'll start believing it. Right? Here's another one that I've heard over and over and over. And that's this: nothing good is ever going to come of this. Right? The circumstances I'm in, nothing good is ever going to come. So Ken, don't stand up today as you kick off this series and try to tell me some Bible story, how it all worked out happily ever after and Jesus came back and the guy got healed and life was great, because the circumstances in my life right now are so bad and so desperate. There's absolutely nothing good that can come out of where we are right now. And we start believing it. And to go one step further, we have some, and it may have been us at some time in our life, and it may have been somebody that we know and that we've cared for and we've loved and we sat down, but sometimes we even get so desperate that we'll say, you know what, it's not worth going on any further. It's not worth continuing. The pain is too much. It's not worth fighting for the relationship. There's no hope that it will be any different. Some go so far as to get to that place and say, you know what, I'm not even sure that it's worth living anymore. And we start to tell ourselves these lies, and we start to believe them. And so for the next few weeks, we're gonna talk about this really happy topic. But I think it's relevant, and I think it's real, and we're finding so many of us are going through these times where we go, God, I don't know what to do next. Nothing seems to have a future that changes. And so what do we do in the meantime? Now, these are hard conversations for me. First of all, when I'm preaching this series, it is for me as much as it is for anybody. We start to cry out, God, hey, where are you? And we start to look for him. But for me, it's kind of double hard, because I'm a problem solver, like many of you. And so I get to sit down with some of you guys as you're navigating these in the meantime moments. Right? And here's my MO is I'll listen to you for about 5 minutes. And then I want to jump in and say, okay, great. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we solve the problem. I'm a problem solver like many of you guys. But in the meantime moments, many times have no solution. In fact, some of you guys sit down with me and go, hey, Ken, listen, I already know there's not an answer. So I don't need you to give me an answer, but I just need someone to what? To listen. I just need to talk about it. And so as we start to wrestle and we start to struggle, I start looking for solutions, and we find ourselves in these seasons. Perhaps you're in one this morning, or you're watching online and somebody said, hey, you need to check this out, and you're in a season of in the meantime. I want to start with this question that's sort of an emotional question that I think, at least for me, it's at the core of this tension, and that is sort of this idea of, hey, does God know? Does he care? Is God aware of what seems to be happening in my life, in my journey right now? Because I feel like I am out on an island all by myself. And if I could just get even a glimpse of hope and a glimpse of confirmation that the sovereign God of the universe still loves me and still knows my name and still cares for me and is aware of what's happening in my life, that in and of itself would almost be enough to carry me over for a season. I have good news. If we're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, the New Testament talks about this very time in our lives. And I have even better news. If you're not a follower of Jesus, the New Testament still talks about this time in our lives. And so we're going to dive into Matthew chapter 11 today as we kick this off. So if you have a Bible and you want to flip it open or dial it in, however you choose to get there. And let me just say this up front. Man, when we get in these seasons of our life, here's the truth. Here's what I understand about the truth of God's word. Although it may feel so, God is not absent. Although it may feel like it, God is not apathetic. And although when we find ourselves in this circumstance, it may feel like it, God is not necessarily angry with us. And I throw that last part in there because I can't tell you how many folks that I sit down and sort of navigate some of these in the meantime decisions and what do they do next and how do we refine joy and hope and purpose and all of those things. And the questions that start to come out is, hey, well, what did I do wrong? Why is God angry with me? What did I do? Where is he? And I want to tell you, God's not angry with us. God's not apathetic, and God is not absent, even though when we're on the island, it may feel like it. And so I want to leave you with this phrase this morning, and that's this. Maybe if you don't take anything else home, just take this home and resonate on it. God's silence does not equate with his absence. God's silence does not equate with his absence. Even when we feels like he's absent, he's still present, right? And the truth of the matter is, as we start to look at Matthew chapter 11 here, let me just kind of admit my own fault, and I don't know whether you want to throw yourself into this category or not, but perhaps when it comes to, hey, we feel like we're on an island and God's not talking to us and God is absent in our world, perhaps we've had a season of our life or a day or a weekend or a spring break or a business trip or some other time in our life where the truth of the matter is, we actually had no desire to have the presence of God in our life either. It almost might be a little hypocritical on our part to say, hey, God, I want to be frustrated because I'm not hearing from you, when the truth is, some of us have actually put our shutting him out of our life on the calendar and scheduled it. We've made a reservation for sin. We put it on ice. We stuffed it under the seat. Hope the police don't find it. We've booked a trip to go say, hey, the last thing I want to do is on my way to Vegas is to crank up a little worship music here and say, hey, God, I just want to sense your presence right now, right? And so lots of us have been on the other side where we have completely shut him out. My mom, oh my goodness. If I heard it once, I heard it 5,000 times as a kid. You're going to be known by the company you keep. So hang around with the right people, you'll make the right choices. There have been times in my life where I'm known by the company I keep, and I've chosen the wrong people to make the wrong choices on purpose. So, Mom, I need your voice, a la the Holy Spirit, to get out of my head, please. And we crank on our music, whatever ours is. Mine in high school was the Beastie Boys. You know, you got to fight for the right to party, but I don't know what yours was. You know, we crank it on and we go in pursuit. And so we know how to shut God out. And I think all of us would say there's been a day, a week, a month, a season of our life where we've done that on our part. Here's the great news. Even then, even in that moment, he's still present. Even when we shut him out, he's not absent, and he's not apathetic, and he's not angry. There's a man in the Bible named John, in his old age, sat down and looked back on his experience with walking with Jesus. And he wrote the words, for God so loved the Christians, right? For God so loved those that make good choices growing up, right? For God so loved those that just fear him along the way. And he said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And in that moment, he settled the account for you and for me that yes, he loves us. Yes, he knows our name. Yes, he's present. And no, he's not absent, apathetic, or angry with us along the way. And so I want to dive into this a little bit together. And let's just kind of see. For me, I navigate this season this way. When I'm in the meantime, I just go pick up my sword and say, hey, it'll help Ken if I can find at least one person in the Bible that is having the same feelings that I'm having. So when I'm there, and I don't know what's caused you to get there, but when I find myself there, just go pick up these 66 books, and I start chewing them up. And I go, God, at least if I'm not the only one, at least if I'm not the first, and if I can see that there was someone that I clearly know you loved that has experienced the same kind of doubts and questions and struggles and frustrations that I have, at least it would be helpful to me. And the good news is there's lots of pictures of many who are on an island. And I want to start this morning with two stories. One is a guy named John the Baptizer. So if you're in Matthew chapter 11, we're going to see a picture of this story. And some of you are going, well, he's John the Baptist. I say John the Baptizer because he was known for baptizing people. That's where he got his name. He wasn't a Baptist. That wasn't even around at that time of the world. So he was known as a baptizer, right? And look at what he says. Look at this story right here in Matthew chapter 11, verse 1. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12, he went on from there to teach and to preach in the towns of Galilee. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent for the disciples to ask, hey, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? And so in other words, Jesus is here and he's teaching with his core set of guys. He's about to send them out, and right at that last moment, this group of guys come running up. Hey, whoa, Jesus, let me ask you a question. We're John's disciples. You have your disciples. John has his. And John has sent us to ask you a question. Are you the one who is to come? Or should we expect someone else? And we're supposed to get you to answer that question, and we're supposed to take the results of that back to John. Now, anyone know why John couldn't ask the question himself? Do what? He's in prison. Yeah. He's in prison. He's in prison because as he was preaching and teaching, he kind of stepped on some political toes. Right? The king at the time was a man named King Herod. His dad was King Herod that executed all the children in the Christmas story. And so the king at this time was a man named King Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas had a brother named, everybody remember? Herod Philip. And so these two guys were brothers. Evidently, dad liked to name everybody Herod because even the niece was named Herodias. Right? And so catch this. You got to follow this story to understand why he's sitting in prison. King Philip, Herod the Philip, and Herodias decide to get married. Philip goes on an adventure to Rome for an extended stay. Okay, and we can't make this stuff up. I don't know why it's crazy. I mean, we don't even do this anywhere in Arkansas. They don't marry their niece, but that's what happens. Right? Herodias and Herod Philip decide to get married. Philip goes on an extended trip to Rome, and so Herodias decides to have an affair with her other uncle, King Herod Antipas. And so they get married. By the time Philip comes home, he discovers that his wife/niece has now left him to marry her uncle/now husband. Now, the story is known everywhere. Long before social media, they didn't have Facebook to blow this thing up in 24 hours and the whole world to know, but it was still a scandal, and this was terrible in any culture, much less Jewish culture. And so you got to love John the Baptist as he was teaching on sin and repentance. He used the story of Herod and Herodias in all of his teaching. Herod thought it was kind of funny. Herodias, not so much. And so she has her new husband, the king, throw John the Baptist into the dungeon, not just any dungeon, but the furthest east dungeon all the way down in the desert. And we're going to see a picture of where that was in a town called Machaerus here in just a second, right? And so this story is crazy. John is in prison because he was literally using the king and his now wife/niece as an example of what it needs to look like to have sin in your life and need to repent. And John is just left there. Okay, in their days, just for the record, there's no court date. They throw you in the dungeon until they need your spot or somebody remembers they need to do something with you. So he's just sort of rotting away in the dungeon, and he begins to have what every single one of us have when time goes by and by and by, and we're not hearing the voice of God in our life. He begins to have doubt. And so, here's what's interesting. Jesus loved John the Baptist. Remember, when John was around before Jesus, everybody knew who John was. No one knew who Jesus was. It was John the Baptist that was baptizing when Jesus came walking up, and it was John the Baptist that says, hey, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. You have been following me, but I am not the guy. He is the guy. And John was the one that announced Jesus. Their mothers were distant relatives. So these two guys are related, cousins in some capacity down the way. And look what Jesus says in verse 11 there about John. Among those born of women, there has not risen up anyone greater than John the Baptist. John the Baptist is the greatest man on earth. Wow. How would you like for him to say that about us? So when the greatest man born on the earth to a human, his relative, the one that announces his arrival to the world, is in prison, what do you think Jesus does? I mean, surely Jesus is going to go visit him, right? I mean, Jesus sent the guys down to take a care package with some fish and some loaves and to go down and check on him. I mean, I don't know. He's Jesus. Break the dude out of jail for all I care. I mean, he's the greatest man on earth. He's one of your best friends. He's a relative of yours. He's the guy that announced you're coming. I mean, surely Jesus is headed that way. And Matthew tells us that Jesus withdrew. He withdrew. He went the other way. Jesus at the time was living in Nazareth, and he decides, hey, John's in prison down in Machaerus. I'm going to head up to Capernaum. I'm going to the other side of the lake. Not only does he not go, Jesus goes in the opposite direction. He doesn't go to the king and plead with the king to let John go. And you almost have to see a picture of this to understand it. So throw the picture up of the map first, Josh. So this is where Jesus was in Nazareth. All of John the Baptist's ministry, for the most part, was up and down the Jordan River, and he's thrown in this furthest east prison in the dungeon down here on the top of a hill in one of the king's palaces. Right? Jesus, if he doesn't want to do anything, for goodness sake, just stay put. There's plenty of distance already. But not only does he not do that, he goes in the opposite direction. It gets worse. Okay, down here in the dungeon, in the desert, in Machaerus, take a look at the view that John the Baptist had every day. It's beautiful, isn't it? I don't know if there's a lot of air conditioning. I think there's one more slide that has yeah, there it is. It sits up on the top. That's what he got to stare at, rotting in the bottom of the dungeon every day. It doesn't look like a whole lot of AC. It looks pretty hot to me. Right? Now check out Jesus' view. He goes to Capernaum, and he is sitting on the other side of the lake. John's rotting in the dungeon, and Jesus is under a cabana. And doesn't that feel like our story sometimes? Man, God, where are you? Not only did he not come running, but he went in the opposite direction. And so John says, listen, I've been in the dungeon now for over a year, probably closer to a year and a half. He calls the guys in that have been bringing him food, because in the dungeon, they didn't feed you. It's not like prison in our country. If you don't have friends that'll bring you food every day, you starve to death in jail. They don't care. So he calls them in, and he says, fellas, I know that he says that's who he is. I'm hearing all the stories, but I need to know if he's really the guy. I need you to go and ask him. So after a year and a half, he's having these doubts. What about me? He's doing all this for everyone else. And look at Jesus' response in 4 and 5. Jesus replied, hey, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, and those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. In other words, I want you to go tell him about all the great things that I'm doing for everyone else. The blind can see. The lame can walk. The imprisoned have been set free. Well, probably don't tell him that one. Just go tell him that he can have confidence that I am who I say I am. I am the promised one because of all the things that you are seeing me do for someone else. And I share this story with us because when we are in our Machaerus, when we are in our dungeon, and when we start to have doubts and wonder, hey God, do you care? Do you hear me? He is still present. He does still care. He does still love us. And I love the Bible because this next little verse right here in verse 6 is something that if we're not careful, we can just read over and just completely miss it. But he says, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. And the first time I read that, I thought, okay, great. And I just kind of kept going. Kind of like why Matthew put in there that he went to Capernaum, and you're thinking, why would you include that? Why tell everybody he went to the beach? I almost missed that the first time, and I missed this one the first time. Right? Blessed is he who does not stumble. Blessed is she who does not stumble on account of me. In other words, this is Jesus' confession. Hey, when I don't answer the prayer the way that you desire, when you're praying and praying and praying, and you see no hope for anything to ever be any different, this is your new normal, circumstances just are what they are. When it gets that way for you and you feel completely isolated and alone, blessed is he and blessed is she who does not stumble and turn and run and walk away in spite of me. In other words, I'm going to do some things that you're not going to have any idea that I'm doing in the background, and you're not going to be able to see them in the foreground. But blessed is you and blessed is me if we choose not to walk away in that season of in the meantime. I love his response. And the last story I want to close just real quickly with is a story that's also pretty familiar, I think. And this is a story, and I love it because it takes place in the same place where John had been baptizing, right? And so at this point, we don't know whether John has passed. He was beheaded by Herod ultimately. He was never given his freedom. Herod finally needed his room, so he chopped his head off and put someone else in it. And then here's a story. Jesus has now showed up in that same place. Jesus is preaching and teaching in the same place that John had been preaching and teaching and baptizing. And the people there, though, are like, man, this guy is amazing. John was good, but John never did miracles. This guy even does miracles. He is the one. He is the Messiah. And in the midst of his teaching there at the lake, this guy comes running up out of breath. And you can flip over to John chapter 11 if you want to, but he comes running up and he's completely out of breath. And he says, Master, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, I don't know about your circle, but if you were to come running down the aisle for me and say, Ken, the one that you love has been in a car wreck. And I started immediately thinking about my girls. As soon as I find out my girls are okay, is Rita okay? And then to my mom and dad, and then to some extended family. But to not have to give any name at all is a pretty small circle of love. And the one he's talking about was a man named whom? Lazarus. He's talking about a man named Lazarus, one of Jesus' dearest friends. And what do you expect to happen when one of Jesus' dearest friends is sick and they come to tell him? What do you think Jesus is going to do? I bet we think Jesus is going to do the same thing the disciples think he's going to do. I mean, for goodness sakes, Jesus went around healing people that he really didn't even necessarily have a relationship with, know their names, know their stories. He just touched them and they were healed. He raised people from the dead. And so surely the one that he loves is sick, and the guy has come all the way, and he also loves his sisters, Mary and Martha. Surely he's got to go. And so the disciples say, hey, get up, pack the bags, let's go. And Jesus says, oh, sit down. We're going to wait. But Jesus, this is your boy. Oh, I know. But God is up to something way bigger than anything you can imagine or they can imagine. And Lazarus can handle it, and Mary can handle it, and Martha can handle it, although they're probably not going to like it. And they're probably going to judge me and be frustrated with me, and they did. But the one that Jesus loved had those same questions of doubt as he was sick and ultimately died. Wondering, hey, where is he? Where's my friend that has healed everyone else? Where's my friend that I've been with and seen him do that along the way? In 5 through 7, it says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea. Man, let's not confuse God's absence or his apparent absence as apathy. Let's not confuse his silence with his absence. He is ever present in our lives. Right? And I share both of these stories with you in hopes that maybe we can begin to, when we find ourselves in one of these in the meantime seasons, we can begin to rediscover some hope and a purpose and joy that has been sucked out of our lives when it seems like we're just not hearing God respond the way we desire. This isn't going to be one of those series, I don't think, where you're like, oh, Ken, thanks for preaching today. This one was good enough that I can put a button on it and I don't even need to come the next 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think it is that. I think this is a season where we acknowledge on the very front end, hey, we may be asking ourselves, what do we do when there is nothing else we can do? This may be our new normal. It may be our new future. And Jesus says, blessed is he, blessed is she who does not stumble or lose their faith on account of me. So I want to go all the way back to the very beginning. And the 3 lies that I think we say to ourselves and we begin to believe sometimes. I'll never be happy again. It's just simply not true. Nothing good can come from this. It's not true. I will acknowledge with you, by the way, the good may not be for us. It may be for somebody else. But to say nothing good can come from it is just simply not true. And then to say there's no point in continuing on with life, it isn't true. When we find ourselves in the meantime, at least for me, I lose joy, I lose hope, and I lose purpose. And my prayer is that as we look and see people that God clearly loved and clearly cared about, we would recognize when we are in the dungeon of Machaerus in our own life and we are having doubts and we are crying out, where are you? We're just like Lazarus. We're just like Mary. We're just like Martha. We're just like John the Baptist. We are in some pretty good company. And so here's what I want to do. I want us to say these out loud together. Just because I think somebody here may be in this season, or if not, you may get there, and it may just be good to hear the words come out of our mouth, even if we don't believe them in the moment. But let's just say this together. Say, I can be happy again. I can be happy again. One more time. I can be happy again. Something good can come from this, and let's emphasize the can. Something good can come from this. One more time. Something good can come from this. And the last one is there is a purpose to this pain. There is a purpose to this pain. I've asked the band to come back, and we're going to just give you a moment today to just kind of rest for a second. So you guys can come on back this way. And we're just going to sing one song over you. You may want to pray. You may want to just move and find some space in the room. You may just want to sit and allow this word to be sung over top of you. But my guess is that if we're in this season, there are times where it's overwhelming. We don't know where to turn. We're looking and scrambling and grasping for some hope and some joy and some purpose again in our lives. And Jesus is ever present. Never, never allow and equate what appears to be his absence as him not being present in our lives, even when it seems overwhelming. So I'm just going to invite you to a time of just kind of prayer and meditation as we sing this, and then I'll close us in prayer when we're finished.